It's great to be with you. Thank you for joining us for this first installment of Understanding Laudato Si. But before we take a look at the text itself, before we get deep into the encyclical, what I'd like to do in this particular segment to kick things off is to talk about the context into which Pope Francis's encyclical enters, that this is not by any means the first instance or the first time that the Christian community has offered a reflection on what it means to be a human person, what our relationship to the rest of creation is, and how we understand in according to our faith what the rest of creation is all about, how our loving God has brought this world into existence. So to better understand what's so significant, what's new, what's in continuity with the previous teaching and tradition, what may be particularly insightful for those of us here in the 21st century, all these different aspects of the encyclical that are really speaking to the hearts and minds of so many people today, I think it's helpful to take a look at three different categories, three different what we might call models or ways of thinking about humanity's relationship to the rest of creation. Now, these three different approaches have been present over the course of the last 2,000 years, as various theologians and scripture scholars, saints and ordinary Christians have taken the time to reflect on their role in the cosmos, their role in relationship to the rest of creation. Their particular reflections have fallen under one of these three headings: the dominion model of creation, what we call the stewardship model of creation, and what we call the kinship, or more recently, the community of creation model. Now, these three different approaches, these three different ways of understanding creation and humanity's place within creation have similar things in common. On the one hand, they all affirm from a starting point that God lovingly brought creation into existence. There's no doubt about that. All three of these approaches, all three of these headings and the various ways to consider creation that might fall underneath them take that for granted. Another thing that all three of these aspects of, or three different models or categories for thinking about creation and humanity's place within creation take for granted or take in account is the sacred scripture. All three point to both the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament and say, well, we find resources and ways of understanding what's written in sacred scripture to justify or to support this particular way of understanding what creation is all about, what God intends with creation, what God has planned or intends for humanity with regard to the rest of creation. Let me say a little bit about the first model, the so-called dominion model of creation. Now, those who espouse, those who kind of favor this approach, tend to focus on the first creation narrative in the book of Genesis. Its title, the dominion model itself, comes from Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, in which we read, at least in English translation, that God has given human beings dominion over creation. 2 verses later, in chapter 1, verse 28 of Genesis, we'll read as well that human beings have been instructed to subdue the earth as well. And it's these two passages, these two, in fact, Hebrew words in translation that have been taken out of context, we might say, over the course of the last 2 millennia, over the course of many centuries. And those who adhere to or understand creation and humanity's relationship to creation according to the dominion model point to these passages in particular as their starting point and say, now look, what God has done is made the human person. We come last, according to the first Genesis narrative of creation. We come on the sixth day, toward the end, it would seem. The Sabbath is what follows, and while we may not be the very, very last, we're certainly very important, best for last, that sort of thing. And everything else that came before, this whole light and darkness, the heavens and the earth, the waters and the sky, the plants, the animals, and everything else, well, these are all of the things that God has built, has established as our home and as our resources. In other words, those who affirm, those who hold on to the dominion model of creation assert that human beings are the centerpiece of God's creation, first and foremost, and that everything else has been created for our use, for us to have dominion over, for us to subdue or to take over, People who hold the dominion model assert, whether they do so consciously or not, that human beings have a certain sovereignty, that being created in the imago Dei, which is the Latin for image and likeness of God, or image of God, that means that we are special, distinct, apart from the rest of creation, and that everything that's around us is really like our home, that God has created this beautiful home and given it to us for us to do with as we please. Now, you may understand and you may intuit already that that way of thinking about creation and humanity's place within it can lead to a lot of problems, and has for sure over the centuries. Over the last 100 years or so, in a particular way, in the last 50 years, theologians, historians, philosophers, and scientists have all been very concerned about this particular understanding of the human person's relationship to creation. And biblical scholars in particular have gone back to the texts, have gone back to sacred scripture in reading not just these two passages, Genesis 1:26 and 1:28, out of context, but looking at Genesis 1 with Genesis 2, with the whole of the book of Genesis, with the whole of sacred scripture, with all that we believe in terms of our theological tradition. Scholars have decided that, this isn't actually, in fact, what it means to be a Christian or to hold a Christian view of creation and humanity's relationship to it. In fact, as a sneak peek at what's to come as we look at Laudato Si in particular, Pope Francis at one point says very explicitly that this understanding, reading Genesis, reading the sacred scripture to suggest a dominion model, that human beings have the right to dominate or to have sovereign authority over all of creation, to do with it as we please, he says this is not a reading of the scripture that is in consistent teaching with the church. This is not what we believe. So what's happened instead is that scripture scholars and theologians, ordinary Christians, people of good faith, goodwill, have gone back to the Bible, have gone back to the tradition, have gone back to things like science and other resources of human learning and knowledge to say, well, wait a minute, okay, if this dominion approach doesn't really work, if this doesn't make sense, how can we understand what it means to talk about creation and humanity's relationship to it? This is where the second category, the second model arises, the so-called stewardship model. This approach is somewhat similar to the dominion in the sense that human beings still hold a central part, a central place within creation, a special place indeed, but it's different in the sense that God hasn't made all of creation, animals and plants, the earth, the rest of the universe, for our needs, for our use alone. Instead, this world, this cosmos, this universe, what is in Greek called an oikos, or household, this is actually the household of God. It belongs to God, and it has been entrusted to us as human beings. It has been entrusted to us as well as entrusted to the rest of all these living creatures that inhabit this planet with us. In fact, that's where the English title, Care for Our Common Home, comes from in Pope Francis's encyclical. This common home is the oikos, the household of God. The stewardship model takes into consideration not just Genesis 1, but also Genesis 2, where, if you remember, human beings are created not just out of nowhere, but ha-adamah, from the earth. And it's God's very breath, God's ruach, God's spirit, that is breathed into this earth creature, this Adam, this you and me, we human beings that are made along with and from all the same elements and aspects of the created order as all those creatures around us. It's in this garden, it's in this earth, it's in this place that God instructs human persons in Genesis 2 and Genesis 3 and what follows to be good stewards, to be gardeners, to be caretakers for all of creation. Now, this is what it means to talk about a stewardship model of creation, that we have a vocation as human persons, a duty, a mandate, a responsibility to care for the rest of the earth, to care for fellow creatures on this planet, and we might imagine for the rest of the cosmos and universe as well. In other words, human beings still stand at the center, but it's not free reign, it's not domination or complete sovereignty, it's responsibility, it's mediation. Some adherents, particularly our brothers and sisters in the Eastern churches, will talk about human beings as the priests of creation, that you and I serve as mediators, offering our prayers and offering all of creation up to God in a joyful proclamation and celebration of our good Lord, our good God. So there's certainly an improvement here. There's a call, there's a responsibility, there's a, we might say, a call to action that's involved here, that to be a steward doesn't mean we just do as we please, or that we just do nothing and we just let things happen as they happen, but rather we have to be actively engaged in caring for and cultivating this planet, this world, this oikos of God. Now, there have been some people over the course of centuries, over the Christian millennia, that have found that even the stewardship approach as a way of thinking doesn't go far enough, isn't quite in line with what it means to think about creation from a Christian perspective, or what it means to talk about being a human person in relationship with the rest of creation. People like our very own St. Francis of Assisi, the founder of the Franciscan Friars, which I am one, you can tell from my brown habit here, the inspiration at the core and center of Pope Francis's own ministry. Now, he's trained as a Jesuit priest, a wonderfully prayerful man, an intellectual, a scholar. He was at one point a rector of a seminary and a superior in the Jesuit community, a brilliant thinker and organizer and leader, but there seems to be something of a Franciscan heart within him. In fact, he took the name Francis of Assisi for a reason. In addition to his identification with evangelical poverty, Francis of Assisi has long been associated with care for creation, with ecology, with the environment. In fact, it was in the early 90s that Pope John Paul II, now St. John Paul II, declared Pope Francis of Assisi the patron saint of those who work for ecological justice. So it's no accident that Pope Francis takes the title Laudato Si for his encyclical from the Italian of the first two Italian words of St. Francis of Assisi's famous Canticle of the Creatures. Praise be you, my Lord, which is how it begins. And Laudato Si is the untranslated praised be, or praised be you, my Lord. Now, unfortunately, I think a lot of people have a tendency to romanticize Francis of Assisi, to say, oh, he's the guy who preached to birds, he's the guy who loved deer, he's the guy who tamed the wolf of Gubbio, he's the one who gathered all the animals around him in Greccio during the celebration of Christmas that one winter, and all these things are, to some extent, very true. There's no doubt about that. Francis of Assisi had a particular fondness and love for non-human animals. But here's the thing that's easily overlooked. In the Canticle of the Creatures, when he calls his other aspects of creation, including inanimate objects or non-sentient creatures like the sun and the moon, or water or fire, wind, Mother Earth, all of these aspects of the created order, Francis refers to as brother or sister or mother, and oftentimes we just romanticize that like we do with the stories of him with the animals. But at the heart of the Franciscan tradition, at the heart of St. Francis of Assisi's nature mysticism, is a deep understanding for our interconnection, our interdependence, and our interrelationship with all of creation. Now, the stewardship approach is a vast improvement over that dominion model of creation that says that this is just our territory, our land, our playground to do with as we please. And the stewardship approach says, well, no, this is the earth, this is the world, the universe that belongs to God and is on loan to us. But the kinship model of creation starts from a different place and says, we human beings, you and I, we, all of us, are creation. We are not middle men or women. We are not aliens kind of placed here from without. We are part of creation in the true sense that comes to us in the second creation account in Genesis chapter 2. We are ha'adamah, our very being, our physical corporeality. This is made of the same elements, made of the same stardust, as the quote often attributed to Carl Sagan puts it. We are made of the same elements, oxygen and nitrogen and carbon and all those other things that make up our very physical beings. These are the same things that everything else in creation are composed of. We are part of the same family. We share deeply, deeply, deeply a DNA that is so close to so much of the world around us. And on the atomic level, we're almost indistinguishable from the rest of creation. Science has shown us this. And it's not something to be feared or something to be concerned about reconciling with our faith. Instead, as Francis of Assisi intuited, it's okay to celebrate. In fact, this is what God has intended for us to hold up and lift up and join with the rest of creation in praising God, because we too are creatures, not unlike the animals around us, the plants that we eat or consume or that photosynthesize so that we might breathe, the water that nourishes us and sustains us and gives us life, and the whole earth and so on. There's so many aspects of this created order, this created world, and this universe that we oftentimes just take for granted, or that we think we're so apart from or different from. So this kinship model of creation, it begins with an emphasis on our connection, on our interdependence and interrelationship. It says that we are not rulers, nor are we landlords of this oikos of God, but rather we are siblings and family members of the rest of creation. And Pope Francis will emphasize this at various points in Laudato Si. People sometimes are concerned when they hear me talk about the kinship model of creation. They say, okay, well, if we're all family, if we're all part of this community of creation, well, what kind of call or responsibility do we have to do anything about caring for the rest of it? And that's where this idea of not a responsibility or a job or a duty, like one is hired to be a steward or one is enslaved to care for another, as we might imagine in the stewardship model of creation. Nobody asked us to be stewards of creation. It's just sort of expected or demanded of us. Instead, if we start from a perspective that we are family members, that we are kin, that we are interrelated with the rest of creation, then our place of response, our care for the rest of creation, is one of love. It's one of familial connection. It's one of what St. Bonaventure, Franciscan, who also happened to be a saint, a doctor of the church, a brilliant theologian, he said that we are called to be pious. Going back to the original word in Latin, pietas, which means duty or care, responsibility for one's family. One is pious. One exhibits piety when they're fulfilling their familial obligations, not from a place of external responsibility or as if one was hired, but from a place of love and concern and devotion. So as we move forward, it's important for us to think about these three different categories, to keep them in mind, to have a sense of the history, the kind of landscape, the environment as it might be, of the Christians reflecting on theology of creation. And with appreciation for the dominion model of creation, what that means, how that's been used to justify mountaintop removal and pollution of waterways, the overuse of water like we've seen here in the United States with the Colorado River and the devastating effects of overuse of water and the drought in our western states and southwestern states. It's been used to justify the extraction of natural gas and of carbon-based fuels, coal and oil and so on, and its burning and its use. The stewardship model of creation has come in as a corrective to that, and it's what most people affirm today. Most Christians and theologians, at least as a starting point, will say this is the better approach. This is the way to move forward. But there has always been this minority tradition that we should keep in mind as well. This kinship or community of creation model, in which we recognize as our starting point our interdependence, interrelationship, and familial bonds with all that exists in this world, that God has created us, just as God has created everything else in this world, and loves us and loves that creation as well. So as we continue to reflect on Laudato Si, I hope this initial, although somewhat lengthy, introductory presentation may be of some use to you. It certainly will help us to serve as a reference point, as we move forward and look at the text itself. May the Lord give you peace.